Thank you all so much for watching another one of my shows. William Wallace for America. With me in this interview, sitting next to me is one of my favorite representatives, Larry Frieman. Thank you so much, Representative Frieman, for being on the show with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, William, and I'm always glad to be on your show.
Well, I tell you, we did an interview before session, and I said I wanted to come back to you and get a legislative wrap up, with you after the session. We're going to do that today. Not only recap some of the highlights and some of the good and the bad things that came out of this legislative session, but you've got some interesting information I think everybody's going to want to hear in this interview.
Well, I hope so, and I'm ready to share it with your listeners.
Well, let's talk about that. So how did the session go? How do you think the session overall went?
Overall, I thought it went pretty well up until the end, and we're going to talk about the end. But overall, not counting or including the budget and the spending, I think we passed some very good legislation. We passed some really good bills to tighten up the criminal code. We passed some things to protect our children and families. So overall, that went pretty well. The last part of the session, the spending and the budget, not so well.
Well, this was a fiscal session, so the budget was paramount. Now, let me just ask a dumb question. Every year, you all do the budget every year for Louisiana?
Yes, we have a once-a-year budget, and we do a budget each and every year that we're in session. So we budget for the next fiscal year.
But this session, and this is the reason I'm asking this question, this session seemed a little bit more explosive when it came to the budget. Like last year, you didn't hear much about the budget. They say, budget, boop, 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 wrap up. But this year it seems like the budget, all eyes were on the budget, everybody's fighting about the budget. Why this year?
Well, because we had over a $2 billion excess and surplus. When you have over $2 billion, and what are you going to do with those $2 billion? That's what caused all the turmoil. That's what caused a lot of the difference of opinion that you saw at the Capitol. So it was really the amount of money that was there, and what are you going to do with it?
Like who gets to spend it? I guess kind of like a husband and wife, when there's a surplus in the checking book, they're going to fight over what to spend it on. The husband might want to go on a vacation. The wife might want custom drapes.
That is a very good analogy, and sometimes I think that's how it operates in Baton Rouge. But yes.
And the custom drapes are an investment in your house, right?
It's an investment, I guess. And you could look at it that way. But that's really where all the turmoil came, is just having this large amount of money and what the best way to handle it, and that's where a lot of differences of opinion started.
Well, we're going to get back to that in just a second, but before we talk about, you brought up something that I want to talk about for a second, is criminal justice reform. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I noticed, I spoke to a lot of Democrats that had criminal justice reform, and even Republicans, and it's my opinion, what I saw, a lot of Republicans and Democrats came together a lot this session on criminal justice reform. Would that be accurate?
Well, no, I would say that's not accurate. And in fact, most of the criminal bills that we passed on party lines. The Democrats did not vote for those bills. In fact, I even had my own criminal bill, House Bill 188, which dealt with dangerous offenders. And unfortunately, it did pass the House and Senate, but passed mainly on party lines. It's sitting on the governor's desk. He hasn't signed it yet. And I have to say, if history is any indication of the future, the governor vetoed all 5 of our criminal bills last year, and I fully expect him to veto all the criminal bills that we passed this year.
But isn't criminal justice reform an important thing for everybody?
Well, it's not criminal justice reform. If you remember back in 2017, they had the Justice Reinvestment Act, which was letting people out of jail, getting our jail numbers down. Well, I'm not going to say there's any studies to show this, but since that time, our crime rate has increased. So we, as a legislature, over the last couple of years, have been trying to tighten up the criminal code a little bit further, keeping people in jail a little longer, making it a little bit more tougher. And every time we've taken a step to make things harder on the criminals, the governor has stepped in and vetoed it.
Well, I guess when it comes to making it harder on them on one side of the fence is what the other side, I guess, is arguing about. But there has been some good criminal justice reform on both sides, some good conversation, I guess is the better word for it.
Possible conversation, but again, at the end of the day, when those bills came to the floor of the House and the Senate, usually they passed on strict party lines.
Okay. I'm going to go back and look at the ones that that you're talking about, so we get a good idea on that. Because I heard some other ones that were interesting, in getting back criminals their rights. I guess, is that something different than?
Well, of course, giving back criminals their rights, the Democrats are all in favor of that. Anytime you talk about making it tougher on criminals, making a sentence longer,
there's the two differences I was talking about. Yeah,
two differences. When you're talking about criminal justice reform under the 2017 Act and something similar to that, they're all for that. When you try to tighten that back down and say, okay, we got a crime problem, we want people to stay in jail longer, we want to prosecute them more vigorously, that's when the Republicans and Democrats differ.
Okay. We'll have to go back and look at those bills later on. So let's talk about money. Unless you got something else we want to talk about before the money, because the money is going to be the biggest part of this interview and recapping this session. Because I always tell people over and over again that I believe that conservative values know no party, and I have met Democrats who are more conservative than some of my Republican friends. So, but conservative values are faith, family, fiscal responsibility. Did conservative values prevail in this session, or did conservative values not cross party lines, or were there even Republicans who didn't vote in a conservative way when it comes to the money issues?
Well, that's a very good question, and really it's how you define fiscal conservatism. And we believe, there was a group of us in the House that believed the best way to be fiscally conservative is not to spend the money on projects, one-time projects. It was to pay down debt, which then would free up money into the future to help us with these projected shortfalls. So it's how you look at it as to whether or not it was fiscally conservative. In my opinion, the way we could have been fiscally conservative was to pay down as much debt as possible, freeing up money for the future, and governing for the future, not today. When you spend all this money on projects today, you're governing for today, not tomorrow. Our vision was, let's do things today that helps us in the future, helps us with tomorrow. And tomorrow, in 2 years, we're looking at a major deficit when the 0.45 sales tax goes away. That's $450 million a year that we're going to lose in revenue. And we felt that by paying down a lot of debt, it would free up enough money to start offsetting those shortfalls.
So the reason why I talk about the conservative values crossing party lines, because I saw many Republicans vote to raise the spending cap. And I'm not criticizing anybody, on anything at all whatsoever. I'm just simply saying, making the point that there were Republicans who voted to increase the spending limit, and you would think that that's where all the conservative values lie. Were there many Democrats that voted against it, or all of them voted for it?
All the Democrats voted for breaking the expenditure limit or exceeding the expenditure limit. There was only 19 in the House, 19 votes to not exceed the expenditure limit, 19 out of 105. So we were a small minority of House members. But all the Democrats voted to exceed it, and I believe it passed 39-0 in the Senate. So every senator, both Republican and Democrat, voted to exceed the expenditure limit.
And that's why I'm saying it this way, is not to divide Democrats and say they voted for something that might be bad or might be good, however they want to put it, was to show that a lot of Republicans voted with the Democrats to be able to raise the spending cap. And like you spoken on the Senate side, all of them, Republicans and Democrats, all voted for it. So my lead in on this is that the way I understand it, your thought process and the people that agree with you is, if we pay off our debt now, and this is a number I'm sure you know, if you pay off the debt now, it's going to save millions of dollars in interest payments or in payments. And if you pay that debt down now, it frees up that cash to be able to spend the money on things later, opposed to blowing the money now and having the projects paid for and still having the debt. Is that a good way to look at it?
That's exactly right. And here's a better, even more simpler way to put it. If we spend it all now, which we're doing, in the next 2 years when we have a deficit, now we're going to go tell the hospitals and the universities, well, now we're gonna have to cut your budget. We're gonna have to cut your budget because we don't have enough money. So as I told presidents of universities that would call me, I said, do you want me to pay you now and cut you later? Because that's exactly what's gonna happen. We could give you the money now, you could build your building and do your maintenance or whatever it is now, but in 2 or 3 years when we have a shortfall, we're gonna come cut you then. So wouldn't it be better for us to maybe not give you as much, because they were gonna get some, not get as much today, and then in 2 years, we don't have to cut you. And when I did present that to university presidents, and one of them being at Southeastern in my area, he understood. He said, look, I understood, I've been through cuts. I don't like to have my budget cut. I said, well, just understand that you won't get as much under my plan as you would under theirs, but we also may not have to cut you as much either. And they understood that. But unfortunately, we were in the minority, and what we wanted to see happen didn't exactly happen.
So things got a little ugly at the end. And it said that there were some rules broken or deals are being made or whatever. Do you want to highlight some of those things now? And because I think that's important. I'm kind of jumping forward a little bit because we're also going to talk, and give the listeners a little heads up, we're also going to talk about alternate budgets that you all been working on, that you foresaw this coming a year ago, so you are working on alternatives before the last 30 minutes.
No, that's absolutely correct. And getting down to the last 30 minutes of session, I mean, it takes us back just a tad bit further behind that, but we were concerned as a body that we were going to be presented with this budget at the last minute, basically, as time is winding down. And it's exactly what happened. With 25 minutes to go in the session is when they come to the floor and say, okay, HB1 and the amendments are now posted. It was 32 pages of amendments that referenced Senate amendments that referenced the actual bill. So in order to look at it all and figure out what was going on, it wasn't going to take 8 minutes or 8 hours. It was going to probably take a day or two to sit down with those papers and figure it all out. But they gave us basically about 8 minutes to say, okay, now you have to vote. And what happened, we started trying to ask questions. We wanted to make a floor speech. We wanted to do whatever we could to bring out the information and gather the information. And the speaker basically stopped recognizing us. We were pushing our buttons, he wouldn't recognize us. We were making motions, floor motions, he wouldn't recognize us. So to say it got ugly, it got very ugly. Rules were broken. We have a 48-hour rule that says we have 48 hours to look at HB1 before we had to vote on it. That rule was broken. It wasn't waived. It wasn't, they didn't suspend the rule, to my knowledge.
Right.
They just ignored it and said, too bad, you have 8 minutes, and that's it. One of the bills, I think it was HB2, they literally gave us 8 seconds. From the time he presented the bill to the time we voted was 8 seconds.
So you're not just talking about one instance where you had to pass it to see what's in it. You had like several.
At least 3 or 4.
3 or 4 that you had to pass, you had to vote on it to see what's in it.
That's correct. HB1 is the budget. HB2 is the capital outlay where they're for projects. And then there was the supplemental spending bills on all the excess money. And we had almost 0 time to even know what was in there. And, by the way, if you saw the recent article quoting Chairman Bodie White, who is a chairman of finance, who drafts these things, he even said, we didn't know what was in it, and they gave us no time to look at it. So it wasn't just the conservatives who were saying we didn't have time. The Senate is saying they didn't have time. And in fact, in an article I saw today, President Cortez said, I normally keep the Senate informed, but I didn't this time. I failed the Senate. Well, let me just tell you, I think he not only failed the Senate, he failed the entire state when he didn't allow the Senate to see what was in it. And we weren't allowed to see what was in it on the House side either. So that was really what caused all the turmoil. That's what caused all the dissension. And unfortunately, there was only 9 of us who voted no in the House, and I think 3 in the Senate. I mean, I, as a member of that House of Representatives, could not in good conscience vote for a bill that I had no idea what was in it.
So because you're one of 9 that didn't vote for it, can the argument be made? Well, if that's such a small number of people that didn't vote for it, and all the others did, maybe there's something good about it and not bad about it.
Well, I will challenge you.
I'm going
to challenge you to find one House member, not in leadership, one House member that could tell you, I knew it was in the bill when I voted for it. I promise you, you will not find one House member that could tell you, oh yeah, I knew everything that was in it when I voted for it.
So all the people who voted for it are basically just saying, I'm going to trust the system, I'm going to trust that the money's going to go to the right places, I'm just going to trust this because I'd rather vote for something to not lose a project or projects, or not have me tagged as being someone who didn't invest in Louisiana instead of just voting against it. So was it a matter of principle that people voted against it, or was it a matter of, I don't want to say lack of confidence, but they didn't want to have it reverberate against them later if they didn't vote for it?
Well, no, I think
you follow where I'm going with this?
I think you're absolutely correct. I think a number of my colleagues, who I highly respect, probably felt that way. I'm going to trust leadership, and I say that with quotations because that trust factor is very debatable. I'm going to trust leadership that they are not going to lead us down the wrong path, which clearly they did. There was tremendous amounts of pork spending in there on just things that should have never been in there. And then then some of them didn't want to lose whatever projects they had. So I understand that perspective. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. So that was decisions that each member had to make on their own. I personally made the decision that if I don't know what's in that bill, and there's no way I could know, there's no way I could vote for it. And besides, there were other reasons why I didn't vote for the budget. One, the growth factor's too high. As we understand it, at least right now, it's about 5.7%. We could sustain about a 2.5% growth rate. It's more than double.
Growth in business?
Growth in the amount of growth of the state effort of the budget. How much money we're paying out of the budget with state money.
Okay.
It's growing by 5.7%.
In excess of what it's in other words.
The year before.
In excess of what the year before.
Right. And we can sustain about a 2.5% growth rate. It's at 5.7. Too high. Way too high. Number two, they want to tout that the teachers were getting a pay raise. Teachers weren't getting a pay raise in that budget. The teachers were getting a stipend. We wanted to have the opportunity to vote for a pay raise with that SCR 2 that never came to the floor.
Right.
If you recall, Representative Cruz asked the Speaker, are we going to get the vote for the teacher pay raise, SCR 2? And the Speaker said, we're not taking that up now, and never did take it up. So we never had the opportunity to cast a vote to say, we want to give the teachers a permanent pay raise. Now, keep in mind, there is a reason they didn't want to give them a pay raise. Because it's growing right now at 5.7%. If you'd have added $300 million more to the budget for a permanent raise, it's growing at about 7.5%.
Oh, wow.
So what they're doing now, by the way, is they put this language in the preamble and they passed a House resolution saying, we urge and request the next administration and next legislature to give a permanent pay raise. So they're kicking the can to the next governor to then have to blow up their budget to give a pay raise.
It's almost like, it's interesting that you say it that way, because I heard many people say, well, we're going to give the next governor a lot of money. When we pass a spending bill, the next governor gets a lot of money. So either the, air quotes, they are assuming that they have a chance of getting a Democrat governor, since you feel most Democrats and a lot of Republicans went to that side to vote for it, that they have a lot of confidence that the next governor will be a Democrat, or there's going to be a Republican governor that they get to make look good, which I don't think that, that's split. There's as many Republicans that voted for the spending cap left, there's as many Democrats who didn't or who also voted for it. Is it a booby trap, is the point I'm getting to, for the next governor? Because let's say a Republican governor, let's say the powers that be realize, you know what, we're going to get a Republican governor next time because John Bell Edwards wasn't wasn't as popular amongst the Republicans his last 4 years. So they know, or they believe, that the next governor is going to be Republican. So this is really a booby trap, a landmine for the next governor, because if, like you said, we run a deficit next time, the next governor's have to make a decision to raise taxes or make further cuts and then hurt him in his administration.
Well, I can tell you without question that the group that I worked with for over a year and others, we wanted to set up the next governor for success. We wanted to put him in a good fiscal posture going forward. We did not want our new governor, presumably a Republican, no matter which Republican it is, to come in and have to fight the fiscal mess that Jindal had. And so we wanted to set him up for success by passing a very responsible budget and then taking all this excess, paying down debt, creating freeing up the future money, recurring money that we could use in other areas, and setting that governor up to be successful. I believe, and I strongly believe, there are certain powers that be that occurred in this particular session that did not want to set up the next governor. In fact, I know that some of them don't like Jeff Landry, and presumably they think Jeff Landry may be the next governor, and they were not going to allow him to be successful. They were going to do what they could to make him unsuccessful.
And that's what I said earlier, because it's almost like when you look at this plan to invest now, but knowing that there's going to be a budget deficit next year, or I mean, it's like just a year away.
1 or 2 years, yes.
Exactly. That next governor is going to be faced with huge deficit problems and huge financial problems. So it almost sounds to me almost like a more nefarious plan to force everybody to pass a budget. The governor wields a lot of power, and this is just me guessing, that maybe they here realizes that by forcing the legislature to vote on investing in Louisiana, or using that as the reason to do it, it basically sets up a plan known by a much smaller group of people.
Well, and that's exactly right. And again, the motivation is speculative to some degree.
Right.
But at the end of the day, we know what the facts are. And the facts were we could have had a very responsible budget without breaking the expenditure limit, or we could break the expenditure limit and spend all the money. And that's exactly what we did.
So how are you so certain that you had another plan in place before the one that got passed was?
Great question. And this goes back to late 2022. Representative Brett Guyman, Representative Raymond Cruz, and Representative Philip Tarver and I got together and started looking at the data from the last 20 years of spending and revenues and how it looked going back 20 years and how it's flowing to today. And what we found is that we had some very eerily similar graph charts that from after Katrina and today, where we had a lot of increase in spending, and then we have this big deficit and downturn. And that's the same pattern we're showing today. So when we saw this, we realized we have to cut this growth of our budget. We cannot continue to grow at a higher rate. We got to cut it back. So we started that. And then we put together, when we started seeing all this revenue, this excess and surplus that was coming by, that we were going to be having to spend or deal with, we put together, we called it the plan, the recipe for fiscal responsibility. It was a budget that allowed, paid down almost all of the IUAL, the unfunded accrued liability for the teachers as well as the state workers, and it would allow the teachers' pay raise to be funded locally. So we had a plan. It paid for everything without breaking the expenditure limit. Well, the Senate didn't like that. And then actually the bill we passed in the House, HB 1, was actually a good budget. It was at 0.6% growth, so perfect for us, and we agreed with it. Well, when it came back from the Senate, they didn't like that. They wanted to have a teacher pay raise, and they wanted to do a whole bunch of other things. So then
they wanted a teacher
they wanted to take a pay raise,
but they didn't
permanent
get one.
Pay raise.
But they didn't get one.
That's exactly right. But one of their sticking points were, we want a permanent teacher pay raise. So we went back to the drawing board. and modified the plan for fiscal responsibility, put in a permanent teacher pay raise, paid down enormous amounts of debt, and still kept it below the expenditure limit. We gave that plan out to every House member, the leadership, the speaker, Chairman Zarang, everyone got a copy of the plan. Nobody wanted to look at it. Nobody wanted to deal with it. Nobody wanted to even consider it because it didn't break the expenditure limit. So it didn't meet the narrative that they wanted. But suffice to say, and you could take this to the bank, there were plans out there, and ours was one of them, that funded our budget completely, funded a permanent teacher pay raise, and did not exceed the expenditure limit.
How far in advance, or how far long ago, rather, did you all have these alternate plans?
We had those plans, the alternate plan was in the hands of everyone before they passed the expenditure limit SCR 3, which was breaking the expenditure limit, before they passed it at the committee level. So we had it in everyone's hand prior to that.
Was it before legislation?
No. Before they passed SCR 3 out of committee, which was close, which was the Monday before Sine Die.
Okay.
Because that's when they passed it out of committee.
But your budget, you've been working on it for over a year.
The first budget
yeah.
was in place a long time
So
ago.
how long before session did you show them that budget?
Well, that budget was not created prior to session because we were still working on all the numbers.
I see.
And once HB1, which was the first budget that we voted on, and I voted for it to get out the House, it was only a 0.6% growth. So we were happy with that budget, so we didn't need the first budget. We kind of put that one to the side and said, this budget that we can get behind, that was orchestrated by Chairman Zarang, is a good budget, and we all voted for it. It's when it came back from the Senate when we realized we got to find something.
They just
blew it up with all the spending.
What's interesting, so you all had a lot of other ideas to share with them, that you weren't just anti busting the cap, you were more of a, how shall I say this, you offered a lot of other ideas before people had made the decision to bust a spending cap. You say, hey, look, there's some other things that we can do over here. My opinion on all of this is, if I was in the legislature at the time, I would have wanted other ideas, because even if you would have had a hodgepodge of your ideas and the ideas going on, and there was some negotiation to have made it a little bit more inclusive, if you will, on this, where there's other ideas solving problems, it's better than all one way or all the other way. Is that a...
No, that's true. And look, I'm a big proponent of just don't say no. Come with an alternative. Mm-hmm. Come with a solution. We can vote no, but we also had a solution. And the solution was the Plan for Fiscal Responsibility 2.0, which did everything the Senate wanted. It gave the teacher pay raise, it paid down some debt, and we still kept it under the expenditure limit. So we took the Senate at its word. They wanted to give a permanent teacher pay raise. So we worked it into our plan, and it was absolutely worked. We had the Pelican Institute, we had PAR, we had a number of different organizations look at it. Every one of them said, this will work. And they did not want to consider it.
So how did they win? How did the other force, I guess, behind the busting the cap, how do they win that argument when you all had a fiscal responsibility? And look, we have mostly Republicans. This is not, and I don't want to say that Democrats are not the good guys here at all whatsoever. It's not why I'm saying Republicans and ours. I'm just saying that if we have a majority Republican legislature and majority of them are saying they have conservative values, yet this more conservative plan didn't edge out the more fiscally not so responsible one, maybe in some people's opinion.
Well, how did they get there? How did they win? Well, it's probably multifaceted. Number one, some people just afraid to vote against leadership. If the speaker is going a certain direction. Some people are very afraid to vote against the speaker for whatever repercussions they may redeem from that. Number two, some of them got promised projects in their district. If you vote for me, I'm going to put this project or this project in, or if you vote against the spending cap limit, we're going to remove these projects from your district. So they get threatened. And there were a number of senators threatening other House members on their projects. Another one is, if I vote against it, the governor's going to line item veto my projects. So there's a lot of concerns about repercussions that people may have been concerned about. Now, I don't know why someone would have feared a speaker who was 3 days or 4 days away from not being the speaker anymore. What could he do you in 3 or 4 days? But could they have taken projects out? Of course, and they have done that. So they've punished some of our members.
But taking projects out doesn't punish the legislator.
It does not.
It punishes the district and the people.
It punishes the people. They think by taking somebody's project away punishes a legislator. It punishes the local government. It punishes the people of the district. It punishes the people in the area where the project was going to be done. It doesn't punish the legislator. Legislator has nothing to do with the project.
Right.
It just happens to be in their district. And by the way, every member in the House who has a district also has a corresponding senator in that district. So if you take the project out of the member's district, you're also punishing the senator. And those senators all voted for it.
Right.
So
I'm laughing at the irony here.
It is
if there's some senators that are going to their legislators saying you're going to get this project taken out, and it's out of their district, it gets taken out of their district also. It hurts the people. And then the other funny twist I hear on this is there was a tweet that I noticed earlier where they said that the same legislators that voted against busting the spending cap are now complaining about projects that are being removed from their districts.
Right.
As if to say, you're conservative on one side when you want the money, but you're not going to vote for something, and it goes back to that.
Well, and keep in mind now, had we not broke the spending limit, we stayed below the spending limit, there would have been a significant amount, there was hundreds of millions of dollars that were being spent on projects already, under the spending limit, okay? It's the ones that above the spending limit that we didn't want to spend on. So some of those projects, and a lot of those projects that were taken away already underneath the cap. So it was purely retribution.
So basically, we're going to take it out from under the cap, we're going to put it on top of the cap, here's the cap, see you later.
So you can move money around and say, these projects, all of the folks who voted against the spending limit, all their projects are above the cap. Mm-hmm. So now they want their projects, so, they're being hypocritical. That's total hogwash. A lot of those projects were already under the cap anyway. They just went in and removed them as punishment. They wanted to punish the legislators. I guess that's their right to do it, but it is a horrible way to govern. And until we reform this process and take the politics out of how we spend our money on projects, this is going to happen year after year.
So what do you say to the people in your district and these other districts, that if they come out and say, well, you didn't vote for this, your project's being removed, what do you say to the people of your district that might feel the effects of these projects being removed?
What I say to the people in my district or other districts is, wait till next year. Those projects are going to be funded. The new governor that comes in, hopefully a conservative Republican, which then us conservative House members are going to be more in leadership. We're going to then be able to go back in and fund these projects again. So it's only a year's difference. So I have no qualms about what's going to happen going forward. We believe that this new governor, whoever it is, we will be able to get those projects funded next year.
And a year is not that long to wait when you compare it to the generations that are affected by bad policies or bad spending policies in Louisiana. And if in your opinion, that is, if these are bad spending policies that are being instituted right now or put in place, a year is not too long to wait based on how the bad repercussions those policies are going to have.
Well, and there's no doubt, and as I said before, the things that we wanted to do, which was paying down tremendous, way more debt than we actually paid down, is to help us in the future. So we're looking at governing for tomorrow and the next year and the next year, rather than just trying to get a instant gratification of let's spend the money today on projects. And then I'm not arguing that projects, good infrastructure projects, not band uniforms, not splash parks, not recreational facilities. I'm talking about real infrastructure,
Bridges,
roads,
yeah.
bridges, water, sewer. And there were some of those being spent, and of course those are all good, but we have tremendous amount of other things in there that they're finding out as we go along and analyze it that should have never been in there. So we wanted to do the things that will help us down the road, freeing up the money, reducing our potential deficits, and allowing the next governor and the next administration to govern rather than fight a fiscal mess.
Do you think that projects were added or any budgets were added in lieu of voting for the spending cap? I mean, just like there were some projects taken away from some people's districts as we're funding. I mean, that's not hearsay. Where some people benefit from.
Yes, there was a rumor going around that the speaker, Clay Scheck-Snyder, promised and gave every single Democrat $1 million to spend in their district however they chose, except for Robbie Carter. For whatever reason, he punished Robbie Carter by not giving him his $1 million.
Well, Robbie Carter, the governor, I've heard, is upset with Robbie Carter because Robbie Carter is against the carbon capture in his district.
That's probably the reason. And so that was a rumor. And then just recently, Matt Cormier, who is a Democrat from Plaquemine, posted on Facebook that in the waning moments of the session, he was able to secure $1 million to spend in his district. Well, that rumor has now been verified and has never been denied, by the way, by the Speaker or any of the leadership in the House. So they're quick to come out and say things aren't true. They have yet to say that that is not true, that the Democrats each got $1 million. And according to Matt Cormier, who showed how he spent his $1 million, we believe that's been confirmed.
So wait, how do you he talked about how he spent $1 million?
$500,000 to Plaquemine Parish for an ambulance and some defibrillators, and then the other $500 was divvied up $100,000 to different schools for band and athletic departments.
See,
this you tell me why we're funding band and athletic departments with state money.
Exactly. But this is the point. Like all this sounds great and feel good stuff. Like give the kids new uniforms, they're gonna be happy, education's gonna improve. But the reality is, we're trying to improve Louisiana. We're going back to that growth rate that you talked about with the budget, where the growth rate exceeded what the budget could sustain. That ties into outward migration of our population. So if the economy starts going down and we lose more people because of failed policies in Louisiana, that disparity gets worse. But if we do things that help improve our economy, like pay down the debt, where there's more money later that can sustain to these projects in a way where you're paying cash for something instead of borrowing the money to pay for it, then it works out better in the long run. Is that another way to look at this?
It is. And, some of the things that we got to be concerned about in this budget as well, NGOs, non-governmental organizations. We're now funding again NGOs. During the Jindal administration, they stopped funding the NGOs, which are not government organizations. They're nonprofits and other things. So now we're funding nonprofits, we're funding NGOs, which to me is really ludicrous. I mean, we only have so many dollars to go around to fund state needs. And when you start funding NGOs and building recreation facilities and splash parks and golf courses or whatever else they're spending it on, that is not needs, that are want. Those are wants, right? And
like the curtains.
I was taught, I was taught as a young child, you got to know the difference between want and need. We need infrastructure. We want splash parks and other things. We can't fund wants. We have to only fund needs.
Well, and it goes back to creating good policy. When you create good fiscal policies, pay off your debt, where you freed up the money. I mean, to pay interest. I mean, it's bad enough that as consumers we get hit with that, where we're paying interest on our debts for the things that we want and not what we need. As a state, if we have that same borrowed money, we've spent the money that could have paid off on wants instead of needs. It doesn't free up money for the future generations on an ongoing basis. It's kind of what we're faced with on a national level. We've already heard from Nancy Pelosi. We have to pass it to see what's in it. We've watched our debt go way back. Now, granted, the national debt is different from Louisiana's budget. Louisiana and our Constitution is not allowed to hold debt, but still, it's the same analogy when you look at it, where they keep passing the debt. We have to allow the federal government to keep spending more and more money, which we can't even pay the interest rate on that now. If Louisiana doesn't pay off the debt that they have now, that interest is that money just grows in a way that what happens? Does it take a 2/3 legislature to say we can now have debt? I mean, the past legislatures have put these laws in place in the Constitution to keep us from spending, to keep us from borrowing, and now with a simple vote through some negotiations and threatened of removing some projects and promises of new projects, we're being allowed to raise the debt, or by spending, in other words. That's going to kill the future of our Louisiana population.
Well,
it's a mouthful, I know.
You did, but here's the thing: we're not allowed to incur debt to fund our budget, right? So we have a balanced budget amendment. We have in the Constitution has to be balanced. However, we are carrying a lot of debt on capital outlay. We go to bond commission and they bond out. That's all debt that we owe. We have debt in retirement systems. Tremendous amount, billions and billions and billions of dollars in debt in the retirement system. So the state is carrying an awful lot of debt. I mean, even though we can't do it the way the feds are doing it by funding our budget with debt, but we funding our retirement systems with debt, we funding our capital outlay systems, our projects with debt. We have tremendous amounts of debt, and to have the chance this year to pay off 2 IUALs. We could have paid off both the teachers and the legislative IUALs. That would have been epic. It would have been generational. Unfortunately, we didn't do that. We paid down a good portion of lasers, nothing significant to the teachers, and that's what we're going to be living with going forward. So I really am waiting to see in the next couple of years. I can almost guarantee you that the 19 of us who voted against the expenditure limit, we will be on the right side of history when it's all said and done. That we made the right vote and the rest of them did not.
A couple more things real quick before we start wrapping up. You talked about the debt on all these other little smaller departments, or you said retirement and bonding out for roads and bridges and stuff like that. But and of course it's a separate thing from what I was talking about borrowing money to pay the debts, paying the ongoing budget like the federal government does. But it reminds me of all the little lock boxes. Louisiana, in our Constitution, has all these little lock boxes where all this money is being saved that we can't touch. Everybody's got their little lock box. These little debts are almost like the lock boxes. They're like these little small things that are kind of tucked away that nobody really notices unless somebody's talking about it. Is that a good analogy?
That's exactly correct, and that's really a whole topic for a different day. But to kind of address that, we have these dedicated funds, these dedicated taxes, these statutory and constitutionally dedicated taxes that go to certain things. And you're right, they get locked away. It can only be used for those things, which is in concept it's good, but it's not, because it hamstrings us to be able to pay off and fund our budget properly. And so, there's been a movement to try to do away with these dedicated funds and these dedicated taxes and have everything go into the general fund, and then everyone has to then decide the best way to spend it. Now, with that said, after watching what happened this year, I don't have a lot of faith on how they're going to spend it. So it may be better off being locked up for a little while longer.
lock up all the money.
Just keep it locked up for a while until we figure out that we need to do things differently. We've been doing the same thing for over 100 years in Louisiana, governing for today, not tomorrow. And until we start changing that mindset, we're going to stay exactly the way we are, which is last in most everything good and first in most everything bad. And so until we change that mindset and we start governing differently, I don't see a way out of this. It's going to take good, strong leadership from the Speaker's side, the Senate President's side. We need good conservative leadership there, and we need mainly the most important thing is to have a conservative governor. And we have some good candidates. I mean, I'm not going to mention any particular one.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in fact, probably all the Republican candidates are all good candidates, and any one of them I think would do a better job than John Bell has done. So I'm excited about the chances of seeing a new Republican governor and being able to serve under a Republican governor, God willing that I get reelected. And I'm really looking forward to that opportunity, which also comes with some issues as well. Sometimes it's easier to serve under a different party because then, you know, the pressure is different. But when you have a Republican governor who then puts pressure on your Republican members, sometimes that pressure is a lot worse than coming from the other side. So
that's a very unique way of putting that.
It is, and I've talked to Representative Brett Guyman, who served under Jindal as a Republican, and he said a lot of times it's much more difficult to serve under a similar party than it is the opposing party.
Because you're expected to agree
Correct.
100% of the time.
Correct. But I will tell you this, we probably won't agree 100% of the time, and I hope to be able to continue to cast my votes based upon my principles. I will continue to do that no matter what the outcome, no matter what the ramifications are, because I believe my constituents sent me to Baton Rouge to serve with the principles that I espoused during the campaign. And as long as I stay within those principles, I'm doing what they want me to do. If at any time they choose that they think that my principles are not what they want, they can vote me out of office.
And you can stand firmly and tell that your voters that you voted on principle for the future of Louisiana instead of immediate gratification.
And that's exactly right. I just see it differently than folks who voted for the spending cap and voted for all the spending. I just see it differently. I see a better way to do it, and a more responsible way to do it, and in a way that helps us in the future rather than today.
So, two more quick questions. Mm-hmm. What could have been done better? Let's not say what was bad. Let's say what could have been done better.
What could have been done better, clearly, and this actually goes back the entire 4 years. Clearly, the leadership in the House, the Speaker and all of his, the Speaker pro tem and all of the chairmen could have had better communication with the delegation. We were kept in the dark most of the time in these 4 years, and we were told things as needed, I guess, and at the last minute, and never really kept us in the loop on a lot of things. So better communication could have been done better. Better organization, have a better relationship between the Speaker and the delegation chair. Representative Miguez was our delegation chair, and the Speaker clearly never got along much, and they never worked together. And I'm not blaming either one, but they didn't. And the people who suffered were the rank and file members like myself of the Republican Party. We suffered for that over those 4 years. So those are the things clearly that could be done better. Communication, working together, letting us know what's the plan, what's coming, what's in the future. Those kind of things are really important. And I think you're going to see that with the next group of speakers who are running. Most of the ones that I know that are running want that type of communication and want to have a team working together. And I believe that's going to be something you're going to see better done in the next session.
We'll wrap up with one of the first questions. What good came out of this session?
Well, again, we passed some good criminal bills. I mean, we have a crime problem in Louisiana, especially in our cities, and it's spilling over into our suburbs. We passed some very good bills there. We passed some really good bills protecting our children and family. That gender affirming type care bill outlawing that, I think, is a monumental bill. We got to protect our kids. They are not capable of making those decisions at 12 and 13 years old, and we got to protect those kids. Once they get 18, all the gloves off. They can do whatever they want. But until that time, the state really needs to step in and say no, not until you're 18. So those types of bills were really good. And, there's also some other things that we did, tying loose ends up around the state on different other issues. The real big debacle, in my opinion, has been the budget and the spending. But other than that, I think you take that out of the equation, and I think the rest of the session was pretty good.
Awesome. That's not so bad on that one.
Right.
Although, on that note,
it's a big note. It's
a big note,
and it really left the session in a sour note. And a lot of people were dejected and upset about how this went down, and all of the breaking of the rules, and the way we were disregarded. I think people got a really big sour taste in their mouths. But look, we're going to come back with a new governor and a new legislature in 4 years, and to serve another 4 years, hopefully. And that first session in 2024 is going to be pivotal. We're going to see what that governor's agenda is.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully it's going to line up with our agenda, and we can really make some good changes for the state of Louisiana.
My opinion is just from the outside looking in. So I don't know, I'm not privy to all the information that the legislators are. So hopefully time will tell whether busting the cap, it can be, how should I say, corrected in the future.
Mm-hmm.
In a matter of opinion, in your opinion rather, that, if the bad things are going to come, hopefully we'll have the right mindset in the future to pull it together.
And again, the governor's going to be a big leader in this, the new governor, and I know at least most of the governor candidates were against breaking the expenditure limit. They came out publicly and said you shouldn't break the expenditure limit. So I know where most of them lined up, and of course we didn't do what they even suggested. So I think you're going to see a much more conservative governor, a much more conservative governing philosophy. And look, conservatism, as you said before, crosses party lines, and I think conservatism is good for the entire state as a whole, from the poor to the rich,
mm-hmm.
to the middle class, to minorities and majorities. It doesn't matter. I think conservatism always helps everyone. It raises all, what is it? The rising tide raises all boats.
Exactly right.
So and that's what it's all about, is trying to make the state better. And I think from the conservative standpoint, we have that opportunity, and I really hope I am part of that group that gets to serve next and really make some dramatic positive changes for the state.
Representative Frieman, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Excellent information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I always enjoy being on your show.
Well, I love having you on here, and I'll ask everybody else to please share the interview, share the podcast, and we're going to have some more legislative wrap-ups here coming up in the next few days. Thank you so much.